As a grandparent or someone deeply involved in the life of a child, you've likely experienced that moment of watching a little one grow and develop in front of your eyes. They take their first steps, say their first words, and start to engage with the world in ways that always bring a smile to your face. But sometimes, there's a subtle feeling that something isn't quite in sync with how other children are growing, especially when it comes to social or communication skills. Have you ever wondered, is my grandchild or loved one developing in a typical way, or is there something more going on? In today's world, more and more children are being diagnosed with autism spectrum disorder, ASD, a condition that affects how a child thinks, learns, and experiences the world around them. Autism can be challenging to recognize at first, as the signs can be quite subtle, but catching them early can make a huge difference in how a child's development progresses. The earlier you notice any unusual patterns and seek help, the more likely it is that your child can receive the necessary support to thrive. Now, I'm not suggesting that you need to be a doctor or expert, but there are some early signs that can give you a clue about what might be happening. By simply paying attention to certain behaviors and milestones, you can play an important role in supporting a child's development. In this video, we'll go over 4 things every parent or grandparent should watch for when it comes to recognizing early signs of autism. Let's start with social development, or rather, the lack of social engagement. One of the first signs that might raise a red flag is a lack of interest in interacting with others. We all know that babies and toddlers are naturally curious and excited to engage with the world around them, especially the people in their lives. They look for eye contact, they respond with smiles, or they reach out to be picked up. This is completely natural development. But when a child seems to avoid eye contact or shows little interest in playing with others, it could be an early indicator of autism. For instance, some children with autism might not respond when their name is called or might not seem to notice other children trying to get their attention. They may not make eye contact the way other children do. A child might be in a room full of people, yet seem completely unaware of the social interactions taking place around them. Instead of engaging in a shared activity, like peekaboo or simple social games, they may prefer to play alone. It's important to note that every child is different, and some may show small signs of this behavior that might just be part of their unique personality, but if you start noticing patterns of social detachment, it's worth keeping a close eye on. You might be thinking, but my child is shy, could this just be their personality? And that's completely valid. Many children are more introverted, especially around new faces or in unfamiliar situations. It's normal for kids to go through phases of shyness. However, what distinguishes autism from typical shyness is the lack of reciprocal social engagement. In other words, a child with autism may not show interest in interacting with others, even after they become more comfortable in a familiar setting. The key difference lies in the consistency of the behavior. Let's talk about communication delays next. By the time a child reaches the age of 1, they typically begin babbling and trying to say simple words. Around 18 months, many children are already saying a few words, and by age 2, they can start putting 2 words together to form simple sentences. If a child is not speaking by 18 months or shows difficulty communicating their needs or emotions, this could be an early sign of autism. Sometimes, a child might develop speech, but their communication can still seem a little off. For example, they might speak in a way that sounds more like a script, repeating phrases or words without much context. This is known as echolalia, a characteristic often seen in children with autism. While all children repeat words from time to time, a child with autism may repeat words or phrases they've heard without fully understanding them or without applying them in a social context. Another red flag when it comes to communication is the lack of gestures. We've all seen babies and toddlers wave goodbye, point to things they want, or try to grab your attention by tugging at your sleeve. But some children with autism may skip these milestones altogether. They may not point at objects to share excitement, or they may not use simple gestures to communicate their needs. Instead of saying milk when they want a drink, they might simply grab the bottle and hand it to you, without any attempt to express their desire verbally. This delay in communication might make a parent or grandparent think their child is just a bit slower with speech development. While that can certainly happen, it's important to remember that these communication delays can sometimes be a sign of something more. If you notice that your child is consistently behind on speech or seems to struggle with communication in everyday situations, it's worth talking to a pediatrician or child development expert to get some guidance. By this point, you might be starting to see a pattern emerge. When it comes to recognizing early signs of autism, paying attention to how a child interacts with the world, socially and verbally, is crucial. However, it's not just about how they interact with people. The third key area to look for is unusual behaviors or rigid routines. Children typically enjoy a bit of structure in their day. They know it's time for lunch when they hear the clock chime, or they expect their bedtime story at the same time every night. But with children on the autism spectrum, these routines can become much more rigid. They might have a very specific way of doing things that they become very upset about if it's disrupted. For example, a child may insist on wearing the same clothes every day or lining up toys in a particular order and becoming very distressed if things are out of place. These behaviors might seem quirky or even endearing at first, but over time, they can become more pronounced. Children with autism often find comfort in predictability and may show great distress when faced with changes in their routine or environment. If your child seems very focused on certain objects or activities to the point where it interferes with their daily life or their ability to engage with others, this could be a sign that something is off. Of course, every child has their own idiosyncrasies, and many kids have preferences or routines. But when a child becomes deeply upset over small changes, it might be worth considering whether autism could be playing a role. Now that we've covered some of the early signs of autism, like difficulties with social engagement, communication delays, and rigid behaviors, let's move on to another critical sign in the next part of the video. But for now, just remember, early detection can make a world of difference when it comes to supporting your child's growth and development. Let's pick up where we left off. So far, we've talked about a few important signs to watch for in young children, like difficulty with social engagement, communication delays, and a preference for rigid routines. These are all significant areas to consider when looking for early signs of autism. But the journey doesn't stop there. There are other key behaviors and developmental aspects that can offer clues about whether a child might be on the autism spectrum. The next one we'll dive into is sensory sensitivities. Every child is different when it comes to how they react to sensory input. Some children love running around outside in the sunshine, feeling the wind on their faces, or playing with different textures. Others may be more sensitive to sensory experiences, like the feel of certain fabrics or the brightness of lights. For a child with autism, sensory sensitivities can be much more intense and more pervasive. They may overreact to things that most of us wouldn't even notice. For example, the sound of a vacuum cleaner might seem like an unbearable roar, or the feeling of a tag inside their shirt might be uncomfortable enough to cause distress. A child with autism might also be less responsive to certain sensory experiences that others find pleasurable. They may not show much interest in playing with toys that stimulate the senses, such as textured toys, music, or activities that engage sight and touch. Alternatively, they may seek out specific sensory input repeatedly. For example, some children might rock back and forth or spin around because the sensation is soothing for them. It's not that they're doing it to be disruptive or defiant, they're simply seeking a sensory experience that helps them feel grounded or calm. As a parent or grandparent, it's important to be mindful of how your child responds to sensory input. If they seem overly sensitive to everyday sounds or touch, or if they engage in repetitive sensory behaviors, it could be a sign of autism. Again, it's not about labeling a child too quickly, but noticing these patterns can help you start a conversation with a healthcare professional if needed. Now, another behavior to watch for in young children is difficulty with imaginative play. A typical child will often engage in pretend play as they grow older. You might see them play house, pretend to cook, or use objects in creative ways to tell stories. For children with autism, imaginative play can be much more limited or absent. Instead of pretending to cook with toy utensils, a child might line up the toys in a neat row or focus on them in a very specific way. They may not engage in the same types of pretend play that other children are involved in, and this can be an early warning sign. This doesn't mean they aren't playing or that they don't enjoy their toys, but their play may look different. Instead of pretending to be a superhero or acting out scenarios with dolls, they might engage with their toys in a more structured, repetitive manner. This lack of imaginative play can be one of the hallmarks of autism, as children on the spectrum often find comfort in structured, repetitive activities rather than open-ended play. When you notice a lack of imagination in play, it's worth reflecting on how your child is engaging with their surroundings. Do they seem drawn to patterns and sequences rather than storytelling? Are they less likely to play pretend games with other children or even with you? Again, this might just be part of their personality, but when paired with other signs, it could be something to explore further. We've touched on social, communication, and behavioral signs, and sensory sensitivities, as well as difficulty with imaginative play. But the final area to consider is the presence of motor difficulties or delays. This is something that often goes under the radar, but it's a key piece of the puzzle when it comes to recognizing autism. Many children with autism experience delays in motor skills, such as fine motor, using hands for tasks like holding a pencil or buttoning a shirt, and gross motor skills, like running, jumping, or climbing. For example, a child may seem clumsier than their peers, or they may have difficulty with activities that involve coordination. They might have trouble learning to ride a bike or tie their shoes. Some children may show an aversion to physical activities, not because they don't want to play, but because they struggle with coordination or motor planning. In some cases, children with autism might also exhibit repetitive motor behaviors, such as hand flapping, twirling, or rocking. These movements can be soothing or provide sensory feedback, and they often become more noticeable as the child grows. If you notice that your child struggles with basic motor tasks or seems unusually uncoordinated compared to other children their age, it's something to take note of. These motor difficulties can sometimes be a part of the broader autism spectrum, as motor planning and execution can be affected by the way the brain processes information. The key takeaway here is that while motor difficulties alone don't necessarily indicate autism, they can sometimes go hand in hand with other signs. If your child is exhibiting motor delays, especially when combined with the other behavioral or developmental patterns we've discussed, it's worth considering an evaluation with a professional. Now, I know what you might be thinking, but every child is different, and there's no one-size-fits-all when it comes to development. And you're absolutely right. It's important to remember that no two children are the same. Some may show only a few signs, while others might exhibit a wider range of behaviors. It's not about diagnosing right away, but about recognizing when certain behaviors or patterns persist over time, especially when they stand out in comparison to other children of the same age. If you notice any of these early signs, whether it's social difficulties, communication delays, sensory sensitivities, limited imaginative play, or motor issues, take note of them and reach out for support. Early intervention is key, and the sooner a child gets the support they need, the better their chances for growth and development. At the end of the day, being aware of these signs is not about panicking or rushing to conclusions. It's about being an informed, proactive caregiver who is attuned to the needs of the children you care for. Recognizing these behaviors early on and getting a professional evaluation can make a world of difference in how a child navigates their development. So, don't hesitate to seek help if you notice something that feels off. That's all for today's video. I hope you found this information helpful. If you've seen any of these signs or have your own experiences to share, leave a comment below. Remember, we're all in this together. Take care, and I'll see you in the next video. Now that we've covered the early signs of autism, such as social difficulties, communication delays, sensory sensitivities, and motor delays, it's time to address something crucial: what to do next. If you've noticed some of these signs in a child you care about, whether they're your child, grandchild, or someone you're close to, you may be wondering, what should I do now? It's a great question, and one that many parents, grandparents, and caregivers have asked at one point or another. The first thing to remember is that it's okay to be concerned and to seek help. There's no need to feel like you're overreacting, and certainly no need to feel alone in this. It's natural to want the best for the children in your life, and early detection and intervention can significantly improve outcomes for children with autism. So, let's talk about what you can do. The first step is always to trust your instincts. If something doesn't feel right, it's perfectly okay to seek a professional evaluation. Pediatricians and other child development experts are there to help you, and they are familiar with these signs. If you feel like your child or the child you're concerned about is not meeting developmental milestones or exhibiting concerning behaviors, don't hesitate to bring it up with their doctor. Now, the doctor might not immediately jump to an autism diagnosis, and that's okay. Sometimes, it takes time for certain behaviors to become more apparent. But what's most important is that you're being proactive. You're giving the child the best chance to get the support they need to thrive. That might mean some early screenings, assessments, and if needed, referrals to specialists, like developmental pediatricians or child psychologists. Speaking of specialists, early intervention programs are one of the most effective tools we have. These programs are designed to address developmental delays in children as early as possible, often starting before the age of 3. These programs typically involve a team of professionals who work with the child on speech, motor skills, social behaviors, and other areas where they might be struggling. The goal is to help the child build skills and strategies that will serve them throughout their life. The great news is that early intervention works. Children who receive therapy and support at a young age tend to show greater progress in language development, social skills, and adaptive behavior. It can make a tremendous difference in helping them manage the challenges of autism and find their path to success. But let's not forget that early intervention is not just about therapy, it's also about creating an environment where the child feels supported and understood. This is where family involvement comes in. Parents and caregivers can be the child's greatest advocates and allies. Being involved in therapy sessions, learning strategies for communicating with your child, and being consistent with routines and expectations at home can reinforce the progress being made. Sometimes, it's the small, everyday moments that help a child thrive. It could be as simple as engaging in a sensory activity they enjoy, or creating a calm, structured environment at home that helps them feel safe and supported. Another thing to keep in mind is that autism is a spectrum disorder, meaning that it manifests in different ways for different children. Some children may have mild symptoms and be able to manage in mainstream classrooms with minimal support, while others may need more intensive intervention and care. There's no one-size-fits-all solution, which is why it's so important to have a tailored approach to the child's needs. Some children may need more help with communication, while others may need assistance with social skills or emotional regulation. Recognizing their unique needs and getting the right support in place can make a world of difference. Now, let's talk about something really important: creating a support system. Navigating the world of autism can feel overwhelming at times, and you don't have to do it alone. Whether it's connecting with other parents and support groups, reaching out to local or online communities, or talking to a therapist or counselor, having a network of people to lean on can provide invaluable support. These connections can offer emotional support, practical advice, and a sense of solidarity. You'll find that there are many others who are going through similar challenges and triumphs, and sharing those experiences can help you feel less isolated. I also want to mention something that might surprise you: celebrating progress, no matter how small. In the journey of autism, there will be many milestones, some big, some small. And each step forward is worth celebrating. Whether it's the first time your child uses a new word, makes eye contact, or engages in play with a peer, these moments are important. They may seem small in the grand scheme of things, but they represent growth and progress. It's easy to focus on the challenges and the things that haven't been achieved yet, but taking time to recognize achievements, no matter how small, helps build hope and momentum. Remember that it's okay to feel a little uncertain or worried at times. You don't have to have all the answers right away, and there's no shame in seeking help when you need it. Parents and caregivers often carry the weight of wanting to do everything perfectly, but the reality is, we're all learning and growing as we go along. The most important thing is that you're showing up for the child in your life. Whether it's offering support, seeking the right services, or simply being patient with the process, your love and care can make all the difference. So, what's the takeaway from all of this? If you've noticed signs of autism in a child, trust yourself. Seek help when needed. Remember that early intervention works, and there's no one-size-fits-all approach. Each child's journey is unique. Surround yourself with a support system, celebrate progress, and take it one step at a time. Above all, remember that you're not alone in this journey, and the efforts you put in now can lead to meaningful progress and positive change in the future. Thank you so much for tuning in today. If you have any thoughts, experiences, or questions, feel free to leave them in the comments below. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe for more helpful content. We're here to help you every step of the way. Take care of yourself, and remember, every child deserves to be seen, heard, and supported.